The shrine stood at the heart of the village like a scarred relic, once sacred, now hollow. Its once polished stone steps, carved from red volcanic rock, were chipped and splintered, veins of moss growing through the cracks. Time had not aged it, guilt had. Vines curled around its foundation like sleeping serpents, and the wooden door, always left slightly ajar for the spirits, now hung stubbornly closed. No wind moved it. No songbird perched upon its frame. The shrine, once the breathing soul of the village, had forgotten how to breathe. Each morning, the priests in their ivory robes arrived early, their faces pale with worry beneath their painted smiles. They knelt on the hard-packed earth, palms pressed together, voices trembling as they recited chants older than memory. They poured libations of milk and honey. They slaughtered goats and painted sacred signs in blood on the stone. They burned incense until the air choked. The smoke rose like questions with no answers, curling, climbing, only to vanish into nothing. The people kept bringing offerings. Fruits that rotted before sunset. Coins that rusted overnight. Dolls made of straw and palm leaves, their tiny faces turned downward in silence. Some villagers left locks of hair, bits of clothing, tears in jars. They prayed for harvest, for healing, for the return of rain, but the fields remained dry, wombs remained empty, and the dead remained restless. No dream carried visions. No spirit came with blessings. The silence of the shrine was not just absence, it was refusal. The elders, hunched in their woven chairs beneath the old neem tree, spoke little but watched much. Their eyes, milky and sunken, flickered with unease when the shrine's name was spoken aloud. They remembered a time when its stone glowed warm at dusk, when footsteps upon its threshold brought good omens. Now it brought chills. A child once wandered too close and returned mute. Chickens that nested near it stopped laying eggs. Even the dogs stopped barking at night, as if afraid of waking something beneath the soil. One elder, her voice thin as smoke, whispered it first. She still lies there, beneath the steps. The others turned sharply, their silence a wall, but the wall had cracks too. They all remembered the girl. The one whose name they stopped speaking. The one they made sleep beneath the shrine as punishment. Not buried, not killed, just made to lie there. All night. In the rain. With the spirits. Her body wasn't found. She had simply stopped being. And after that, so had the shrine. Something had shifted that night. Something had been taken in, or something had awoken. Now the shrine did not answer prayers. It did not listen. It watched. Its silence was heavier than thunder, more certain than death. So the people prayed louder. Gave more. Dug deeper into their pockets and their fears. But the shrine would not bless them. Remembered? Mara was born beneath a sky bruised with storm clouds, her first cry barely audible beneath the rumble of distant thunder. The midwives whispered afterward that it was not the sound of life entering the world, but the shrine groaning awake. Her mother, Edissa, collapsed at the foot of the shrine steps during labor, the baby crowning just as the rain began. She did not survive the delivery. The village buried her in the red earth behind the shrine, placing cowrie shells over her eyes to pay for her passage to the ancestors. The baby was left in the care of an old widow who lived on the edge of the village, a woman with no children of her own and hands soft from too little work. They named the girl Mara, meaning bitterness, though some claimed the shrine itself had whispered the name into the midwife's ear. Mara grew quietly. She was not loud or wild like the other children. She watched instead. Watched the sky. Watched the ants as they marched in straight lines across the dust. Watched the wind as it bent the trees but never broke them. Her eyes were the color of wet ash, deep, soft, and unreadable, and she blinked slowly when people spoke to her, as if translating their words into another language before answering. When she did speak, her voice was low and even, like someone always on the edge of sleep. The villagers said she didn't cry as a baby, not even once. She had strange habits that unnerved the elders and made the children stare. She spoke to birds as if expecting them to answer, and sometimes they did. Tiny swallows would hop onto her outstretched finger, cocking their heads as if listening. Doves followed her from rooftop to rooftop. She fed them with crumbs from her pocket, whispering things no one else could hear. When it rained, she did not run for cover like the rest. She stepped barefoot into the mud and turned her face upward, arms stretched wide. She twirled in the downpour, lips parted, as if tasting some secret ingredient in the water. She danced not with rhythm, but with knowing. And always she found her way to the shrine. Never inside. Never past the steps. Just near it, sitting cross-legged in the dust, watching the breeze roll over its stones, listening to something only she could hear. The priests hated this. They said it was disrespectful for a child, A girl, to sit so close to sacred space without invitation. But she never stepped over the line carved into the earth. She never tried to enter. She just waited. People called her odd, cursed, too quiet to be trustworthy. The other girls whispered that she walked without leaving footprints. One boy claimed she disappeared into the air for a moment and came back with petals in her hair. Some said she had no shadow at all. But others, mostly the old women with faded eyes and long memories, called her shrine-born. They saw something familiar in her stillness. Something powerful in her silence. They left her food when they could. Slipped beads into her hands. One even kissed her forehead and said, "You came back different." No one asked what she meant. Mara's body grew as her silence deepened. By the time she was 17, she moved with a grace that seemed borrowed from something older than human. Her limbs were long and fluid, her spine straight like a blade. Her hair, thick and black as coal, fell to her waist in loose ropes. Her skin, the color of oiled mahogany, seemed to shimmer when the sun hit it just right. Boys tried to speak to her. A few brought her carved trinkets or ripe fruit, hoping for a smile. She always thanked them kindly, always looked them in the eye, but no one could hold her gaze for long. It wasn't just her beauty that unsettled them. It was the sense that she was listening not only to them but to something behind them, to the sky, the earth, the shrine. She didn't laugh much. She didn't cry either. She watched. The priests watched her too with narrowed eyes. They saw the villagers glance at her when crops failed or dreams soured. They heard rumors that her presence near the shrine caused birds to sing again. That one sick child sat in her lap and walked the next day. That once, when the old tree by the well split in a storm, Mara simply touched it, and it healed. None of these stories were proven. But stories have power in places where history is passed through whispers. And in that village, Mara's story was already being written in secret. She was the girl who had been born where no one should be born. The girl who danced in rain and spoke in silence. The girl who might be sacred, or might be a warning. Either way, the shrine had not forgotten her. And neither had the village. Omari arrived on the back of a white-painted cart pulled by oxen, his robe stiff with embroidery, his shoes still clean from the stone streets of the capital. He was not old like the priests the villagers were used to. He was young, smooth-skinned, sharp-eyed, and walked like someone who expected the ground to adjust to him. His voice was strong and measured, honed in the great temples where chants echoed from golden ceilings. When he stepped down into the dust of the village, he didn't cough or flinch. He simply looked around with the calm of someone who had already decided the place was beneath him. The elders came out to greet him, leaning on their sticks, backs bent from decades of sun and soil. Omari bowed politely but did not lower his head. The village women offered him salted meat and bowls of thick millet porridge. He thanked them but did not eat. The children watched him from behind their mothers, eyes wide, unsure whether he was a holy man or just a stranger in bright cloth. From the first day, Omari made it clear. He was not here to continue the old ways. He was here to correct them. He spoke of cleanliness, of order, of structure. He rearranged the rituals, shortened the chants, insisted the shrine be swept twice daily, even when the wind only brought more dust. He carried books bound in leather, filled with words none of the villagers could read. He quoted them with authority, smiling without warmth. "Purity invites power," he said again and again as though it were a spell. The villagers listened politely. Some were wary but others were hopeful. They had grown tired of the silence from the shrine, tired of unanswered prayers and strange dreams. Omari's words sounded like certainty, and certainty is a kind of comfort. The village elites, the merchant who hoarded salt, the landowner who controlled the water, the old councilman whose son had died mysteriously, rallied behind Omari quickly. They saw in him a tool, a weapon, a way to reshape power in their favor. If the shrine could be made to listen again, they would be the first to benefit. So they nodded loudly during his speeches and made donations to his rituals. They stood behind him like shadows. It didn't take long for Omari to notice Mara. He saw her sitting near the shrine one morning as he came to begin his chants. Her eyes were closed. Her bare feet dusted with red earth. Birds perched on the ledge near her elbow, unafraid. Omari's steps slowed, his brows tightening. She did not move. She didn't even look at him. She was part of the place, part of the air. He hated her immediately. That evening he inquired about her. Who was she? Why did she sit so close to the shrine without permission? The elders avoided his gaze. The elites told him the stories, half with amusement, half with unease. Omari listened, frowning. "This is unacceptable," he said. The next day he approached Mara directly. She stood when he called her name, tall and still. He told her she was not permitted to linger near sacred ground. She asked calmly, "Who says I linger?" "I listen." Omari's face darkened. "You defile what you do not understand," he said. Mara tilted her head. "Then help me understand." But Omari didn't want understanding. He wanted control. In the following days he began to speak about her during his sermons. Quiet at first, veiled in metaphor, about impurity near holy things, about those who use false calm to hide spiritual disease. Then louder, more direct. "The shrine has remained silent because it is surrounded by noise," he said one morning. "The sacred cannot live beside the profane. We must cleanse what stands too close." The villagers grew uneasy. Some nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Mara still sat near the shrine each day, her expression unreadable. She never defended herself. She didn't need to. Her silence was older than their words. But Omari would not be silenced. He summoned the village council and declared that Mara was a spiritual contaminant, that her continued presence near the shrine was a defilement, that the spirits would never return until she was removed, physically, symbolically, permanently. The elites agreed. Eagerly. The others said nothing. And so the first stone was placed on the path that would lead to ruin, paved not with hate alone, but with fear dressed in holy robes. The festival of Eneo fell on the first full moon after the harvest, a night when the villagers lit fires around the shrine, painted their faces with ash and ochre, and sang into the darkness to call the spirits back to them. It had once been a night of hope, joy, and reunion. Even in recent years, when the shrine had remained silent, the people still celebrated, half out of tradition, half in desperate belief that this time the gods might listen. This year the fires burned taller than ever. Omari had demanded it. He ordered torches be planted along the path from the village square to the shrine. He insisted the drums begin early, loud and steady so the gods would hear. The people came dressed in their brightest cloth, though the air felt heavy and the moon, brilliant and pale, seemed to hang low watching. Mara stood at the edge of the crowd, barefoot as always, her face clean and unpainted. She did not sing. She did not dance. She watched the shrine with her arms folded gently in front of her, as though protecting her own stillness. Children snuck glances at her. Some whispered. Others simply looked away. Omari stood before the shrine in new robes, gold-threaded and blinding in the firelight. His arms raised, his voice rose above the drumming, declaring this year would be different. That tonight, they would cleanse the spiritual stain that had clung to the shrine. That the gods demanded not only prayer, but action. Then he turned slowly toward Mara. "The spirits do not return to poison ground," he said, his voice like flint. "They do not bless where the unclean sleep. There is a reason our prayers vanish. A reason the sky denies us. And she," he pointed, "is the reason." Gasps moved through the crowd like wind. Some stood frozen. Others looked to the elders who said nothing. The village elite stepped forward to surround Omari, eyes hard. "She is not of the shrine. She stands beside it but was never called to it," Omari went on, his voice trembling with force. "And yet she sits, day after day, as though she belongs. The spirits have spoken through signs. Through silence. And I, as their servant, must carry out their will." Mara did not run. She did not cry. She stepped forward slowly, eyes on Omari, face unreadable. "What would you have me do?" she asked, her voice clear even in the rising wind. "You will lie where you have trespassed," Omari said. "Beneath the shrine steps. As penance. All night. And if the spirits find you worthy, they will let you rise." A ripple of discomfort passed through the villagers. A few murmured objections, too quiet to matter. The elites moved quickly. Rough hands grabbed Mara's arms. She did not fight. She walked when pushed, only stumbling once when her ankle twisted in the dust. Someone laughed. Another spat. Someone called her witch. One of the children wept but was pulled away by her mother. They dragged Mara up the path of fire, past the wide-eyed statues of gods who no longer spoke, to the foot of the shrine. Omari stood above her, chanting in a tongue no one understood. "Let the spirits judge," he declared and turned his back. They forced her to lie down beneath the steps, where no one ever walked, where the dust was thick and the ground cold. The stone dug into her back. Her hair fanned out like a black halo on the earth. And then they left her there. The festival continued behind her. Drums thundered, dancers twirled, voices rose. But they were hollow sounds now, echoes with no meaning. As midnight neared, the wind changed. The first raindrop fell onto Mara's cheek. Then another. And another. Soon rain fell in sheets, cold and sudden. The fires hissed and sputtered. The paint on the villagers' faces smeared and ran. The music slowed, faltered. Many ran for shelter. Some stayed and stared. Mara remained still beneath the shrine steps. Her lips moved. She whispered names. Names of ancestors. Names of stars. Names no one had taught her. Rain soaked her hair, her dress, her skin. Mud clung to her legs. Lightning split the sky once, twice, flashing white across the village. She did not scream. She prayed. Tears ran down her face, but she did not make a sound. Not when the thunder cracked so loud it shook the earth. Not when her fingers trembled against the stones. Not when the shrine door behind her creaked open, just slightly without touch. By dawn the sky was gray and cold. The rain had stopped. The fires were ash. The village was silent. Mara still lay beneath the steps. Her body was soaked. Her face pale. Her eyes open, not wide, not terrified, just open. Watching nothing. Watching everything. Her lips were parted as if mid-word. Her hair matted to her face, her chest rising shallowly. She was alive but not entirely here. Omari arrived first. He stood at the edge of the shrine and looked down at her without speaking. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Then he turned and walked away. No one helped her up. No one spoke to her. The villagers drifted past, one by one, pretending not to see. But the shrine saw. The ground beneath her had changed. The stones held her shape. A thin crack had formed along the bottom step, like a wound. Something had shifted. Something sacred had been betrayed. And the shrine, which had stayed silent for so long, had begun slowly to remember. In the days that followed the banishment, the air around the shrine began to change. It was not something seen but felt, a kind of stillness too heavy to ignore. The wind that once moved freely through the baobab trees now died at the shrine's edge, curling back as if repelled. Birds that had once sung at dawn now avoided the area entirely. Even the insects, always humming in the thick heat, fell quiet when they came too close to the sacred grounds. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath. The priests continued their rituals. Omari, stiff and unshaken, led them with greater fervor. Each morning he climbed the shrine steps, robes soaked in sweat, voice raised high in prayer. He slaughtered goats, spread the entrails, lit thick braids of incense. But nothing answered. The air remained mute. The stones stayed cold. The crack along the bottom step grew, widening just enough to be noticed but too slow to be stopped. Prayers no longer bore fruit. The villagers brought offerings of yam, kola nut, and honey, but the shrine consumed nothing. The scent of rot lingered in the air long after the food was laid out. Women came weeping, their bellies heavy with life 1 week, empty the next. Midwives whispered of strange silences inside the womb, of heartbeats that faded like smoke. 2 babies were born still in a single week. An old healer declared the shrine had turned its face away from them. She was found dead the next morning, slumped at the base of the neem tree, her mouth full of dirt. The sacred well, fed by a spring said to run beneath the shrine, dried without warning. One morning a boy dropped his pail and heard only a hollow echo. By noon the water was gone. Cracked mud lined the bottom like a dead tongue. The people dug, desperate to find the source again, but every hole they made turned dry within hours. Crops withered, even in soil that had once birthed abundance. Goats birthed stillborn kids. The sky remained clear for weeks, the sun burning the earth to dust. Dreams, once filled with ancestors' guidance, turned sharp and frightening. Men woke screaming of black hands pressing on their chests. Children spoke of eyes watching from inside the shrine. One woman claimed she dreamt of the shrine bleeding, thick, black blood running down the steps where Mara had lain. When she tried to speak of it aloud, her tongue swelled until she could no longer form words. She stopped eating after that. The fear was quiet at first. Whispers behind closed doors, mothers pulling their children close at dusk, people walking longer paths to avoid the shrine. But it grew. It thickened. And still Omari stood tall before them, refusing to bend. "This is a test," he told them. "The gods are silent to see who remains faithful." He blamed weak hearts, unclean spirits, and even Mara herself. He said her presence had tainted the village, and her punishment had not been harsh enough. "We must double our devotion," he declared, face hard beneath the moonlight. "And wait. The spirits are always watching." But the people were tired of watching, tired of waiting, and afraid. Then one morning Mara was gone. No one had seen her rise. No one saw her leave. Her small woven mat still sat beside the broken fence where she had slept since the festival. A trail of footprints led away from it, barefoot, light, But they stopped a few feet into the brush. Just stopped, as if she had stepped out of the world entirely. No scent for the dogs to follow. No torn cloth in the thorns. No answers. Someone whispered that she had been taken by the spirits. Another said she had returned to the shrine in secret and walked inside. One child claimed he saw her dissolve into smoke and rise into the sky. But no one searched for her. Not even the elders. A silence fell across the village deeper than before. Not the silence of peace but of dread. Of waiting for something they couldn't name. They had cast her out. They had made her lie beneath the shrine steps. Now the land was dying. And the shrine, old and cracked and watching, said nothing at all. It began with the old woman who lived alone near the dried-up riverbed. Mama Sephew, once a respected midwife, now a muttering figure wrapped in layers of cloth and memory. She had been mad for years, speaking to invisible guests and warning trees not to sleep too early. Most ignored her. Children mocked her from afar. But one morning, just as the sky turned orange and the mist still clung to the grasses, she appeared in the village square, barefoot and wild-eyed, her mouth smeared with ash. She sang a song no one recognized. Her voice cracked like something pulled from the depths of the earth, sharp, ancient, raw. Then she fell to her knees and began to speak in tongues. Not gibberish, not nonsense, but a rhythm of words too exact to be madness. Her hands moved in tight circles across her chest, then stretched toward the shrine. Over and over she repeated the same pattern: speak, spin, reach. Her voice grew deeper, not louder, like water from a dark well. People gathered to watch, afraid to come too close. She was chosen, Mama Sephew hissed suddenly, her voice now clear. Born on blood. Cradled by stone. Named by breath. The shrine opened its mouth and she was its word. Then her body seized. She convulsed once, twice, then collapsed to the ground, her face twisted not in pain, but in awe. When a man tried to help her up, she laughed quietly and whispered, "She never left. She's underneath us now." That was the first. Later that week, children began saying they had seen something near the shrine at night. Not inside, not on the steps, but underneath. A figure, always half-shadowed, half-glowing, crouching just beneath the lip of the platform. They said she sat there like she was waiting, her head tilted, her arms resting on her knees, long black hair moving even when the wind stood still. Some said she wept, others swore she smiled. One boy described her eyes as the kind that see through bones. Parents scolded them for lying. But the children were consistent. Their stories matched. "They say she hums," whispered one girl. "A song that sounds like crying." Fear sharpened. The shrine, already avoided, became something to fear even in passing. People no longer looked at it when walking by. Even Omari began arriving late to his rituals, rushing through the chants, sweating beneath his layers of gold cloth. His voice cracked during prayers. His hands trembled during sacrifices. Then came the incident with little Ayana. She was 5, playful and bold, always chasing frogs near the shrine steps while her mother traded salt and beans. One afternoon she slipped past the baskets and climbed to the edge of the platform. Before anyone could stop her, she placed her tiny hand flat against the lowest stone. Ayana froze. She didn't blink. Didn't move. Her lips began to twitch, then opened. And in a voice not her own, a voice too calm, too old, too familiar, she whispered, "Let the sky split me open. Let my name rise with the dust. Let them remember the girl they broke." Gasps broke from the crowd. Her mother screamed. Men rushed forward and pulled Ayana back, her hand now shaking, her eyes dazed. When asked what happened, she only said, "She was singing to me." She remembered nothing else. But every night after, she spoke in her sleep. Soft words, the same ones over and over, "They left me, but I am still here." The elders gathered in secret. Their faces grim, their backs heavy with years and regret. They debated whether to tell the people, whether to silence the stories. Omari insisted it was all hysteria. A curse of the drought, a trick of mass delusion. He called Mama Sephew's ramblings dangerous and ordered her confined to her hut. He warned the children's parents not to let them speak of the figure beneath the shrine. He told them the girl was gone. That her name should not be said again. "Do not summon the past," he warned, "or it will walk through the door you open." But fear does not obey rules. And stories do not die from silence. Whispers spread like brush fire. Women began to leave tiny offerings near the shrine at night. A bead, a scrap of cloth, a handful of ground cassava. Not for the gods. Not for the ancestors. For her. Some even began to speak her name again, quietly as they lit their cooking fires. Mara. The villagers remembered the way she used to sit with the birds. The way her presence made the wind bend differently. The way her silence felt louder than Omari's sermons. They remembered the way she lay beneath the shrine that night, and how the rain had sounded like weeping. And so, when the shrine's door cracked open one morning without touch, not wide, just a finger's width, the people did not celebrate. They watched. Because by now they understood, it was not the gods behind that door. It was the memory of a girl they broke. And the shrine, old, breathing, cracked and listening, remembered every tear they ignored. The village began to unravel, not with fire or thunder, but with quiet, personal horrors that slipped into homes like cold wind beneath a door. It started with Elder Dogo, one of the loudest voices that night Mara was dragged through the dust. He had clapped when Omari declared her unclean. Had watched with folded arms as she was left beneath the shrine, rain soaking her skin like baptism in sorrow. One morning, Dogo wandered into his field, ready to harvest his yam crop. What he found left him standing silent for hours. Every plant had grown upside down. Not just drooping, reversed. Leaves submerged in the soil, roots splayed into the air like skeletal fingers reaching toward the sun. The yams, thick and healthy just days before, were now dry and split, veins of rot running through them like spiderwebs. He dug frantically, thinking it was a trick of the eyes, but the earth only coughed up more failure. His neighbors watched as he screamed into the sky, his fists full of dead plants. That same night, a junior priest named Cato awoke in his hut screaming. His hands were blistered, red and cracked like he'd plunged them into boiling oil. But no fire burned in his room. No hot coal lay near. The pain was real. His palms swelled, skin peeling back like old bark. He couldn't lift his prayer bowl. Couldn't even press his hands together to pray. They were warm, he muttered again and again, teeth chattering. She held them. She held them in the rain. When Omari came to him, Cato refused to meet his eyes. He lay curled on his side like a child, his hands wrapped in soaked cloth. It was penance, Omari said coldly. No punishment lasts forever. But Cato did not answer. He had begun whispering to himself, the same phrase over and over, I left her there. I left her there. A woman named Abani was the next. She was among those who had dragged Mara up the shrine path, gripping her by the wrist as if she were a thief and not a girl. Abani had laughed when Mara tripped, and some say she had even spat on the ground near her head. Now Abani could not sleep. Each night, the moment she closed her eyes, she found herself standing on the shrine path again. Only this time she was alone. The torches were gone. The crowd was gone. The air was heavy. And Mara stood at the top of the steps, barefoot, hair dripping with rain. In the dream Mara didn't speak. She only looked at Abani, eyes filled with something beyond sadness. A soundless scream that never stopped. Abani began waking up drenched in sweat, fingers clutching her neck. Her husband claimed she spoke in Mara's voice while she slept, not shouting, just pleading. Why did you leave me there? She whispered night after night. Why didn't you come back? She stopped cooking. Stopped speaking. One day she was found crouched in the corner of her hut, nails torn, eyes bloodshot. She had scratched the word forgive into the wall over and over, though it was never clear if she was asking or offering. Others followed. The merchant who donated oil for the festival feast developed a tremor in his legs, unable to walk straight. His goat gave birth to a kid with no eyes. A young man who once kicked dust into Mara's face lost his voice mid-conversation and never found it again. A girl who had mocked Mara's quiet nature was bitten by a snake, 3 times, and survived, but with fever that left her hallucinating shadows that whispered her name. Each misfortune carried no obvious cause. No pattern, no proof. But the village felt the truth curl around them like smoke. Confessions began to spill in hushed voices, often at night, under blankets or behind huts. I didn't stop them and I could have. I held her other arm. I looked away. I thought she was strange but not dangerous. I thought she would be fine. And always, I didn't think she would disappear. They said it as if her vanishing made it worse. As if the earth swallowing her had sealed their guilt in blood and dust. Omari, seeing his grip weaken, held tighter. He forbade mention of Mara's name in public. He threatened those who repeated, Shrine-born. He banned Mama Sefu from leaving her home. He warned the people of emotional poison, of weakness disguised as mourning. But even his voice trembled now. Even his dreams were growing strange. He too heard the weeping. Some nights he woke to feel breath on his ear. The air smelled of wet soil, of ash, of blood. The people no longer looked to him for protection. They looked to the shrine. Not with hope but with fear. With shame. because something was happening. It moved slow but steady like water cracking stone. It was not revenge, not entirely. It was a reckoning. And it wore the face of the girl they left to drown in the rain. The drought had stretched across the land like a curse etched into the soil. Weeks turned into months without a single drop of rain. The sky remained clear, too clear, a pale, hollow dome that refused to weep. The riverbeds cracked open like dry lips. The wells offered only dust. The fields, once green with millet and cassava, now lay bare, the stalks brittle and brown, whispering like bones in the wind. People grew thinner. Tempers shorter. Hope, like the clouds, had vanished. Then one night something changed. The air grew strange, not cool but charged. The sky was still cloudless, yet it felt heavy as though something ancient stirred just above it, waiting. The villagers lay restless in their beds, sweat clinging to their skin. Cattle moaned without cause. Dogs whimpered and refused to leave the thresholds of their homes. It was just past midnight when the first drops fell. But only over the shrine. Not a drizzle, not a storm, a slow, even rain. It came from no visible cloud, no change in wind. Just steady drops, falling precisely over the cracked stones of the shrine and nowhere else. The surrounding village remained bone-dry. Ashes still blew across the fields. Dust still clung to the leaves. But at the shrine, the stone glistened like obsidian. Water streamed gently down the steps, clean and clear, as if drawn from the mouth of the sky itself. By morning the rain had stopped, and the shrine glowed with a quiet sheen. The villagers gathered slowly, drawn by something they couldn't name. They came barefoot, silent, eyes wide. Children clutched their mothers' skirts. Men held their breath as they approached. At the base of the steps, water had pooled in a shallow basin of earth, collected in a shape too precise to be coincidence. It was not a puddle. It was a form, curved and graceful, like the outline of a woman sleeping on her side. Her arms curled near her chest, hair flowing behind like ripples. No one dared step into it. Then they saw the flowers. Small blossoms had pushed up through the soil overnight, soft blue petals with dark centers, flowers that did not grow in their region, that no one recognized. They bloomed only along the edge of the water's shape, as if drawn to the sleeping figure. The scent was sweet, unfamiliar, and oddly comforting. The villagers stood in silence. No one spoke. Even the birds, which had returned for the first time in weeks, sang no songs. A little boy, no older than 6, broke from his mother's grasp. His name was Jabari, the same child who once claimed to see a woman beneath the shrine at night. He held a tiny flower in his hand, one he had picked earlier and tucked behind his ear. He stepped forward slowly, bare feet careful on the stone. No one stopped him. Not even Omari, who stood rigid at the edge of the crowd, his robes dust-stained and heavy with unease. Jabari reached the step, bent down, and placed the flower gently near the crack that had split through the stone since Mara's banishment. He leaned in, lips parting as if to whisper something. Then he froze. His eyes widened. The wind shifted. And in the silence that followed, he repeated what he had heard, in a voice not his own, a voice too calm, too forgiving to be anything human. "I forgive the small." Gasps rose around him. His mother wept without knowing why. A dog howled in the distance. The water rippled gently, though no breeze touched it. No one could explain it. No one dared question it. But everyone understood. Something had returned. Not the gods. Not the rain. Mara. And she was listening. The rain had brought a fragile kind of stillness to the village, a silence not from fear but from breath held too long. People began to speak of Mara again, not as the girl they cast out but as something else now, something bigger. Some called her the spirit beneath, others whispered the shrine walker. Children left tiny gifts where the flowers bloomed. The shrine had begun to live again, but not as it once had. Its pulse now beat with a different rhythm, one shaped like her. And yet, beneath this new reverence, guilt still stirred in the hearts of the old. One man, Bako, could no longer sleep. He had held Mara's arm that night. He had pushed her forward when she stumbled. He had turned his back when she whispered something he couldn't hear, just before the rain began. Every day since he'd tried to forget, burying himself in work, in prayers, in silence. But when the rain fell only on the shrine, something inside him cracked. He began digging on the third night after the flowers bloomed. He came barefoot, wrapped in shadows, carrying only a rusted spade and a lantern wrapped in cloth to dull its light. He dug just beneath the first step, the one that had cracked the night of Mara's banishment. The earth was soft, as though it remembered being moved before. With every scoop of dirt, his breath grew heavier. He expected bones, perhaps. sacred stones. But what he found first were forgotten offerings, beads strung on frayed twine, teeth of goats, pots with symbols now rubbed smooth. Old sacrifices buried long ago, offerings to gods who never came. Then came the bones. Animal at first, chicken, goat, small creatures twisted strangely, as though something in their death had been disturbed. They were packed tightly, layers upon layers, as though the shrine had been fed too much too fast. And then fabric. It was wedged beneath a stone, damp and clinging to the soil. A torn piece of cloth, deep red, the color of Mara's dress that night. Faint patterns still clung to it, spirals and circles inked with ash. Baco stared at it for a long time, trembling. He touched it, and the soil around it suddenly felt warm, pulsing. He dropped his spade and fled. That same night, one of the older priests, the last who had stood with Omari at the festival, woke screaming. He had dreamt of Mara. But not as a ghost. She lay beneath the shrine in the dirt, her eyes closed, her lips slightly parted. Her skin shimmered like water. The priest stood over her, unable to move, unable to breathe. Then her eyes opened, slow and calm, and she looked at him not with anger but with knowing. She did not speak. But he understood. She had not left. She had never needed to. She had become the shrine. The next morning, as the sun broke over the village, the shrine door, which had remained slightly ajar since her disappearance, closed with a deep, echoing groan. No one touched it. No wind moved it. It sealed itself shut, the ancient wooden frame pressing into stone with a sound like the final breath of a dying beast. Omari came running, his robes flapping. He tried to open it, pulled with both hands, prayed loudly. No answer came. The shrine door did not budge. Villagers gathered, but no one stepped forward to help him. Not this time. They simply watched. And the flowers still bloomed. And the puddle in the shape of a girl had not dried. Inside the shrine no one knew what rested now. But the land did. And every root beneath the soil. And every cracked step. And every night bird that sang softly in the dark. Because Mara had gone beneath the earth. And the shrine had taken her in. The festival came again as it always had, though nothing felt the same. The air was thick with waiting, not celebration. The drums sounded, but slower now, uncertain. The fires were lit, but their flames danced low, quiet, as though humbled. The villagers gathered not out of joy, but out of duty, reverence, and something deeper, awe. Since the last rains, since the flowers bloomed beneath the shrine, no one dared to speak above a whisper near its steps. The door had remained sealed for months. But on this night, beneath a full moon that seemed to pulse with breath, the shrine stirred. It began with a tremor, a soft groan from deep inside the earth. The cracked step glowed faintly, a low amber light pulsing from its core like a heartbeat. The crowd shifted. Mothers gripped their children tighter. Some turned to run. But the wind stilled and a sound rose through the air, not thunder, not chanting. A voice, soft, familiar, ageless, calling one name. Tano. And from the edge of the gathering, a child stepped forward. He was small, no more than 7, with pale, clouded eyes. Born blind, Tano had always wandered as if led by invisible strings, his steps never faltering, his feet never stumbling. His mother had tied beads around his wrists so she could hear him when he moved. Now they jingled softly as he approached the shrine, barefoot and calm. He walked with his arms out, head tilted upward, as though seeing with something deeper than eyes. And when he reached the bottom of the steps, the cracked place where water had once pooled in the shape of a girl, the shrine opened. The door groaned, then split in the center. A golden mist spilled out, curling like smoke, wrapping around Tano without touching him. He lifted his face to the light. The crowd held their breath. And then Tano spoke, not in his voice but in hers. It was Mara's voice. Clear, steady and soft like the wind before rain. No one could mistake it. It did not echo from the shrine. It came through him as if his chest had become a hollow gourd filled with her breath. I am not gone, the voice said. I am what remains. What roots into the silence when all else dies. This place, this shrine, does not belong to the old gods now. It belongs to memory. A hush fell so deep that even the fire seemed to dim. You left me in the rain, the voice continued, but the earth did not. The stones heard. The wind remembered. And so did I. You broke me beneath these steps. Now I rise within them. Tano stepped onto the first cracked stair. The flowers that had long since withered bloomed anew at his feet. The spirits that once answered here have gone. But I remain. I have become what they abandoned. He raised a hand. If you want blessings you must offer more than blood. You must offer truth. You must speak the names of those you shunned. You must remember the broken. You must love the strange. A sob broke from the crowd. An old woman dropped to her knees. A child wailed. One by one the villagers followed, kneeling, bowing, weeping. Some held hands. Others dug their fingers into the dirt as if to feel her beneath it. But Omari stood firm. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He shook his head slowly, backing away. "This is not divine," he whispered. "This is corruption. Blasphemy." Tano, or the voice within him, turned toward him. "You prayed for power," Mara said, "but I asked for rain. I asked for love. I asked for a name." Omari turned and ran. He stumbled over a basket, dropped his staff, and vanished into the dark edge of the forest. He was never seen again. Some say the trees swallowed him. Others say he wanders still, forever hearing the sound of a girl's tears in the rain. When the voice faded, Tano collapsed gently onto the step, sleeping peacefully. The shrine door closed again, but this time with no sound. No dread. Just a hush like a lullaby. In the weeks that followed, the land began to breathe again. The sacred well filled with cool water. Crops sprouted green and eager. A woman gave birth to a child with eyes like Mara's, wide and still and deep. And every year after, during the festival, a single flower bloomed on the shrine's lowest step. No longer for the gods, but for the girl they left behind. And the spirit she became. Years passed and the village changed. The old shrine, once cracked and crumbling, was slowly rebuilt, not out of stone and pride but of memory and reverence. No one dared to erase the past. Instead they carved it into every step. Mara's name, once whispered in shame, was now etched in bold strokes into the stone. Once for every year she had lived, once for every time she had been ignored. The steps bore her story in silence, not as warning but as witness. Beneath the altar, where offerings once rotted unanswered, now rested smooth stones engraved with the names of the forgotten, the misjudged, the quiet souls who had once been left in the margins. It had become a place not of gods but of remembrance. Pilgrims began to arrive, not just from nearby villages but from across the mountains and beyond the riverlands. Some came with heavy feet and heavier hearts, carrying regrets older than themselves. They knelt at the steps, touched the cold stone with trembling hands and whispered apologies, not just to Mara but to those they too had failed. Children came with wide eyes and quiet reverence. They did not fear the shrine. To them it was not haunted, it was held. They brought dolls wrapped in tiny blankets, braided grass figurines, tiny bowls of stew, and flowers pressed in folded leaves. They would sit at the base of the shrine and tell stories to the stones, giggling softly, unaware of the tears that sometimes fell from the eyes of watching adults. The shrine no longer needed a priest. It had no gatekeeper, no guardian. It opened for all, and in its silence, it gave something no sermon ever could: forgiveness, slow and deep, like roots growing beneath the earth. Mama Sefu, older than ever, still wandered the village, but her madness had softened. She now carried beads made from clay shaped like drops of water. "She dreamed the rain back," she would murmur, laughing gently. "She sleeps now but she listens. Always listening." On the anniversary of Mara's banishment, the village held no feast, only a quiet night of candles and prayer. People would sit in a wide circle, sharing stories of those who were once unheard. And when the wind moved through the trees, the flames would flicker all at once and no one dared to speak. Because they knew. The shrine had never truly been silent. It had only been waiting. And now, with every child's offering, with every name spoken in apology, with every step etched with truth, it breathed again. Soft. Watching. Eternal. They made her sleep beneath the shrine. Now she sleeps inside it and she is listening.